A guten Erev Shabbos. The steps of the Haggadah are pretty straightforward, going by their headlines in the beginning of the Haggadah. Kadesh means make Kiddush. Magid, you tell the story. Urchatz, you wash your hands. Motzi, matzah, you make the bracha hamotzi. Then a special bracha just for eating matzah. If you work through these steps, you learn a lot, you eat and drink a lot, you sing a lot. Not much of a mystery. But there is one step in the Seder which defies simplicity by its name and by its very nature. Tzafun, which means hidden, comes right between Shulchan Orech, which means the ready table, that's your meal, and Beirach, benching, Birkat HaMazon, the grace after meals. Tzafun means hidden, and it involves eating the afikomen, the piece of matzah for dessert. Why is it hidden? Why are we eating more on top of the meal that we just finished? Why isn't the name and the thing the same or even similar? Tzafun and afikomen are two very different words. And what does it mean anyway? There you already have 4 questions just on the afikomen. In Jewish family life, it may be one of the oldest acts in the book. If you stop any random Jewish kid on the street and ask him or her, what do you remember about the Seder? This may be very close to the top of the list. You hide the afikomen, you hold it ransom, grandpop slips you a quick 20, everybody's happy. We used to do this around our Seder table, and I admit I had no clue as to why this deal was going down or what it all meant. All I knew, there was a chance to make some quick cash. Our Haggadahs say that we're to break the middle matzah at the outset of the Seder, put aside the larger half of this broken matzah at the beginning of the meal, right after Kiddush, wrapped in a napkin, and eat it later for afikomen. What is this? Why is it so important? What are we doing? Some Haggadahs explain, and others leave it up to us to suss out. On the face of it, we're eating afikomen as a commemoration of the Paschal offering. In temple times, we would eat a holiday meal, just like we do nowadays, and at the end of that, we would leave a little room for the Korban Pesach, the Passover offering. That would be eaten in the way of free people, who eat not because they're hungry, they're ravenous, but for the sheer pleasure and enjoyment of it, just for the taste. This Pesach offering, the Korban Pesach, was roasted, which, if you like the smell of shawarma stands in Israel, backyard barbecue, a braai, this roasted lamb would be such an enticing scent. It was eaten together with matzah and bitter herbs. If you've never tried a delicious cut of meat with some fresh grated horseradish, it's quite a combination. You should try it. Our afikomen is a remembrance of this. Okay, which part? One view says that we eat a piece of matzah to commemorate the actual Korban Pesach, the meat. That's what the afikomen is. And of course, the dissenting view holds that we're eating the matzah to commemorate the matzah that went with the Korban Pesach. As the verse reads, Al matzos umrorim yochluhu. You shall eat it on unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. So, to fulfill both opinions, some people actually eat 2 pieces of matzah, 1 for each one. Seeing as most of us eat 1, we should keep in mind that it's to commemorate whichever one of the 2 is the appropriate part. That also explains why we make an effort to eat the afikomen before halachic midnight at the first Seder anyways. The Korban Pesach was only eaten until midnight, so we always list in the bulletin the time for this midpoint between nightfall and dawn, which this year is 1:23 in the morning on your clock. You'll do your best, but don't worry too much about it. Simply stated, afikomen is a borrowed word for after the meal. The academics have found an illuminating angle on one meaning of afikomen along this vein. Clearly it's not a Hebrew word, it's Greek, and it speaks of a festive procession, like those street festivals sometimes you see in Italian neighborhoods. That must be the most familiar modern-day equivalent. On non-Jewish feasts, there was quite a good deal of carousing. You'd party with your friends, then you'd go roam the neighborhood and find other people still partying and sit down and say l'chaim with them also. In contrast, remember what we tell the wise child at the Seder, Ein maftirin achar ha-pesach afikomen. The halachas of the Korban Pesach are that it was only supposed to be eaten by menuyav, only those who were registered within each family group, or maybe 2 households together, like we learned from the Mishnah a few weeks ago. We don't do this street festival thing of gallivanting all over the neighborhood. So the idea of afikomen in this understanding is a direct contrast to the prevailing custom. Don't go carousing around after your Seder's finished. Don't go Seder hopping door to door, as some do, appropriately, with joy. They go sukkah hopping on Sukkot. At Passover, the point is not to go partying, but rather keep the intimacy and the family sense of being around the table together and completing the Seder together. Rabbi Sachs says, quote, one should finish the evening with a taste of holy food in one's mouth. Hence, the last part of the matzah becomes the Jewish afikomen, a sign of difference between Jewish and Greek culture, between holiness and hedonism. It's no coincidence that whereas Greek culture rapidly disintegrated after the days of Alexander the Great, Judaism sustained its spiritual and moral energies throughout the many crises of its history. That's the end of Rabbi Sachs's quote. And that gives us some insight into how we got the word. But we're still left with the mystery of why it's called tzafun in the order of the Seder and not afikomen. If it's afikomen, so call it the Jewish afikomen. What's with tzafun? Tzafun means hide or hidden, or in some senses sheltering or protecting. In Psalm 27, we say, Ki yitzpeneni besukkah. God will shelter me in his pavilion, is how we read it in one of our translations in our Tehillim class. Literally, God will shelter me in his sukkah. A bit later in Psalms, King David writes, chapter 31, Ma rav tuvcha asher tzafanta. How plentiful is your goodness that you have hidden away for those who honor you, who have awe. That you have made them tzafun. Maybe that's Olam Haba. Maybe it's the world to come. And in Proverbs chapter 2, Yitzpon la'yisharim toshia. God stores up a treasure of wisdom for the upright. In any case here, with tzafun, yitzpon, tzafanta, yitzpaneni, we're talking about something that's hidden from view. It's saved especially, protected as something valuable. Brilliant Jewish minds throughout time have found ever deeper levels of meaning and inspiration in the tzafun, in the afikomen. As we break the matzah in two, they break the word afikomen in two, and they found in it two Aramaic words, afiku man. Afiku man, which means to bring out sustenance. The act of holy eating, which this certainly is, draws holiness, godliness into our most prosaic activities. We definitely get the sense here that tzafun speaks about hiddenness, namely that there's more here than meets the eye. Perhaps that's a deeper meaning of the whole idea of looking or searching. We're supposed to look for the afikomen, it's true, and yet don't stop. Once you've found the pizza matzah, keep looking, keep searching for more wisdom, more understanding, more insight at the Seder especially, but also all year round, as the labels on the wine and the matzah say, kosher for Passover and all year round. There's another halacha that goes with the afikomen. We're not supposed to eat anything else after the afikomen, other than drink the last 2 cups of wine, which are mitzvot in themselves. And the reason given for this is that the taste of the Pesach, taste of the afikomen, that it's commemorating the Pesach, should remain in our mouths. The taste of freedom, to be specific. So you ask, wait 1 second, matzah really doesn't taste that much. It's flour and water and nothing else. No salt, no flavoring, anything. It's really the taste of poverty. Yes, the taste of poverty, which is no taste at all, is precisely that taste that remains with us. Ta'am, in Hebrew, is both taste and reason. Our attachment to mitzvot can have a good taste, like 4 cups of wine, and it also has an aspect of no taste, beyond taste, beyond tam, l'mayla mitam v'das, in the popular turn of phrase, above reason and understanding. We connect to and through the mitzvahs even and especially when they lie beyond the grasp of our reason and rationality. That's a taste to carry with us all year round. Not that you can't enjoy mitzvahs, you can, you should, and there's a particular delight to connecting above physical, practical, tangible delight. This also spurs us to work on ourselves and refine and improve ourselves, although we're pretty good already. To start with, Reb Sholem Kaidaner is quoted in reference to the hidden aspect of tzafun we've been discussing. It teaches us to eradicate those hidden negative parts of ourselves, the unpleasant character traits that are obvious, are obvious, but some of it's hidden. We have to work on that too. Rav Kook writes that while afikomen may mean dessert, or the end of the food, but it's referred to as hidden. The Seder leader hid it, put it aside. That only begs the question. Rav Kook says it's not food for the stomach. In fact, you only eat it after the meal, when you're already full, as the instructions say. It's nourishment for our spirit, because the pleasure is an inward spiritual one, and it's not so readily obvious. Tiferes Shlomo, the Radomsker Rebbe, explains even deeper that appetite itself actually comes from the soul, not just from the stomach. A Jew's desire to eat is not so much because we see a nice bagel and lox, and wouldn't that be delish? But rather our appetite is to elevate everything in the physical realm and put it into the spirit, lift it into the spiritual realm. When we eat kosher, when we make hamotzi, when we bench afterwards, say the Birkat HaMazon, this turns the physical act of eating into something spiritual, lofty, elevated, godly, according to the Baal Shem Tov. Ironically, eating the afikomen when we're already full indicates that this process of refinement doesn't apply here. The afikomen is already open and obvious as a holy process. Still, eating it when we're already satisfied is a siman for drawing down the notion of satisfaction, satiety, abundant material blessings into our tangible physical world. The Sfas Emes compares the name Tzafun to Baal Tzafon. If you look in chapter 14 of Exodus, verse 12, that was the only Egyptian idol that wasn't destroyed in Makas Bechoros, in the plague of the firstborn. In fact, Baal Tzafon endured until the splitting of the sea, until the final destruction of the Mitzrayim, of the Egyptians. Eating Tzafun, therefore, is a final and complete eradication of negativity in ourselves. The Alexander Rav, Rabbi Yerachmiel Yisrael Danzinger's angle on this is that it's the hidden good. The combination of tzafun and beirach means bringing out the potential for good in us and extending it through bracha. Rabbi Malevsky, Zechrono Livracha of Toronto, who's the father of the current Rabbi Malevsky over in Bnei Torah on Bathurst Street, notes that the tzafun is the other half of the story. Remember, early in the Seder at Yachatz, we took a whole matzah, the middle one, we broke it in half. One half was lechem oni, the bread of affliction and poverty. We held on to that when we said al achilas matzah, eating broken matzah as a symbol of our suffering, our brokenness in Egypt. Remember, says Rabbi Malevsky, that's only half the story. The other half is the redemption and deliverance and salvation, both from Mitzrayim and the redemption yet to come, Yemos HaMashiach, the Messianic era, the redemption still to come. And the broken, poor half of suffering is the smaller half of the story. The bigger half is tzafun, that which is hidden, which is the good that we're waiting for, but the time of which and the contours of which are still hidden from us. So at the Afikomen, we actively reveal it and we delight in it. The New American Haggadah doesn't quote all its sources, but it continues this theme of searching for the Afikomen and how that suggests a search for wholeness, completion. The matzah was broken, and there's separation and isolation in our world. We ate one half of the matzah at the beginning of the Seder, and eating the other half now at the end of the meal expresses a desire to bring it all together, make it all whole. That Haggadah also describes the Afikomen in terms of moral optimism. It bridges a gap between a painful past and a happier, more hopeful future, symbolizing our confidence that we will find a way forward. It may be hidden, but when we eat the Afikomen together, all of us, we point towards a sense of the world that unites us even in our diversity. Another note says there that at the beginning of the whole Egypt saga, remember it begins with concealment. Remember the very beginning of chapter 2 of Exodus, times were hard, and a man went out from the house of Levi and married a daughter of Levi. Who were these people? Amram and Yocheved. She conceived, she gave birth to a son, but there was this decree against baby boys of the Hebrews, so she hid her son for 3 months. What does it say? V'titzpenehu shlosha yirachim. V'titzpenehu, she concealed him, she hid him, like tzafun. The Torah says Yocheved concealed baby Moshe with the same word tzafun that we're using here. So we begin the Seder with an act of concealment, and the Afikomen waits to be discovered. God, too, is concealed in our world, sometimes more obviously, like the Exodus story, sometimes completely concealed, like in Megillas Esther. You should know that while many have this custom to have the kids snatch the afikomen and ransom it, there were some communities that don't do it. They say don't accustom kids to steal, even as a joke, although probably most do, and Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav has a unique insight into this. He says, of course we need the afikomen to finish the Seder. That's how you get into this whole ransom bit. The adults, as it were, don't know where that missing piece to the Seder is to be found. Yet the children do, in fact, know. This actually forms a nice closing of the circle to the 4 questions. We began with the children asking questions, and the night proceeds from there. To conclude the Seder, we adults have to admit that there's something that the children know that we don't know. Perhaps the lesson here is to listen to children in their purity, their simplicity, their lack of irony and cynicism, to learn something about freedom and gratitude that might be even beyond our reach. Maharal of Prague sees matzah as the bread of affliction and also the taste of freedom. It's the pure, interior, hidden, spiritual nature of all of us, and thus the reason for redemption. When we eat afikomen, it's completing a process. First, we ate matzah at the beginning of the meal because we were hungry. Now we're not hungry, we're full. We're eating the afikomen simply for its own sake, not to fulfill some inner need, but because we're returning to that spiritual inner being, that soul that we all possess. Rabbi Soloveitchik notes that his grandfather, Reb Chaim Brisker, used to keep the afikomen right by his side the entire Seder, presumably from when it was broken at Yachatz at the beginning until eating it at the end of the meal. If it's supposed to be a remembrance of the Paschal offering, the reasoning went, then the laws of a korban, an offering, is that you can't take your mind off it when you're in the process of bringing it. You have to stay focused on it all the time. So the Brisker Rav used to keep it right there in front of him so he wouldn't take his mind off it during the entire Seder. That's a very high level of concentration and focus. My new Haggadah this year is Yismach Yisrael by Rabbi Yerachmiel Yisrael Yitzhak Danziger, a reprint from the 1926 edition. He writes that his father, the first Alexander Rav, once gave him a piece of afikomen and told him to hide it. The author surmises that this was a reference to Psalms chapter 119, verse 11, where it says, Belibi tzofanti imrasecha. In my heart I treasure your promise. He explained that even when a person keeps things inside, before he brings them from potential, from thought into speech, into actualization or action, it still makes a positive imprint on your heart. So later, when those come into practical expression, they no longer affect the heart in the same way. We say, I got it off my chest, right? That raises the question for him, for the Alexander Rebbe. He says, so why do we have all these actions, these things we have to do? Why do we make all these statements, read through the whole Haggadah, eat the maror, drink 4 cups? Wouldn't it be better if we just meditated, thought inside of ourselves, so the idea of the Exodus would make a strong impression on our hearts and souls, rather than being sort of let go once we tell the story and do the whole Seder? He says that's exactly what Safun is all about. Even though you've brought so much into actuality through celebrating the Seder, the imprint still remains within us. Afikomen, this Pesach, this Shabbat Hagadol seems like a particularly appropriate topic of investigation because so much of this past year and even our present remains concealed. What has happened to us? How and why it's happened? What things are going to look like going forward? It feels like one great big concealment. If we could only have someone tell us that all that meaning, what it all means, and all the time we spent between our 4 walls was just hidden, and if we promised them $20 or a new video game or something like that, just like with the afikomen, they'd give it back to us and we could get on with our lives. We could complete the Seder and go get a good night's sleep. Wouldn't it be wonderful? But it's not like that. So let's do what's actually far more enduring and powerful than any afikomen present our grandfathers ever gave us. Let's let that afikomen help inspire us to work through the pessimistic inclinations in ourselves, however subtle they might be. Let's let the afikomen inspire us to soldier on, even when there might be no taste to it. We don't have a geschmack in what we're doing, or when the good taste is also commingled with a bitter taste accompanying it. as the bitter sometimes helps us appreciate the delicious so much more. We know full well that the goodness hidden away deep inside ourselves and others, as well as those chapters of the story that have not yet been revealed to us, are very plentiful. And sometimes they require some searching in order to find. We are constantly in search of wholeness, of completion, and of filling in what's missing. And we retain our optimism and confidence that things will indeed be better, and it couldn't come soon enough. The sooner the better. We know that God is concealed, and God's ways are concealed. But that doesn't mean for a moment that we shouldn't seek God. We should never abandon the search. We noted that even Moshe was concealed. Moshe being swaddled in his blanket, hidden, placed in his basket, and floated downstream to meet his destiny and fulfill his role as Redeemer. It took 80 years, but it happened. The brokenness in our experience, remember, is only half the story. The larger half of the story remains hidden from view, and it won't end until we find it. Remember that there are things that we don't know that our children know, and we need those also. Maybe, like the Brisker Rav and his Afikomen, it should always stay right by our side, right there with us, next to us. And like Chaim Brisker, we should not take our minds off it during the whole Seder, maybe even during the whole year. Sometimes that taste of freedom is more flavorful and robust when the taste of limitation, restriction, is mixed together with it. And the Afikomen, like the Seder, like Pesach, like all of Torah, has a paradoxical power both to give us the platform to express our gratitude, our joy, our liberation, and also our suffering, and our pain, and our anxiety, and our fear. At the same time as we give voice to our emotions, the goodness and gratitude remains imprinted on our hearts and souls. And finally, let's remember a story we heard in our own shul a few years back from Mrs. Hochman, who was a Holocaust survivor and came to speak to us and tell us her story. Remember, she'd been through everything and never wanted to speak about it. She was close to 90 when her great-granddaughter had to do an interview project for Chat and asked her great-grandmother where she had been during the Holocaust, and all the stories came tumbling out. Someone may remember more details, but the point about Afikomen was that their deportation happened right around Pesach time, and her father gave her a small piece of Afikomen that had been given to him by a Rebbe, the Rebbe with the bright eyes, the Rebbe of Rudzki. She didn't give his name. She kept this piece of Afikomen with her, sewn into the hem of her clothing all through the trains, all through the camps, the forests, the hiding, until she was found and the war was over. And at the end, she astonished us by opening her purse and taking out a small piece of matzah and showing it to us. She smiled and she told us it wasn't the same Afikomen from 1944. She changes it every year at the Seder. But since her father gave her that piece of Afikomen, she's always carried a piece of Afikomen with her every day of her life. All the things we said about Afikomen, let's take a piece of those and take them with us wherever we go too. And let that be the completion of all the stories that wait for good resolution, eradication of all the negativity, and the song of happiness and gratitude filling our mouths. So this year, when so much has been hidden from us and so much has caused us to feel like we were in narrow straits, the Afikomen helps us acknowledge and recognize all those, and at the same time appreciate that there is so much more to the story. May that include good health and confidence and happiness and optimism about the future. May we all taste freedom, freedom from everything that constrains and limits and holds us back. So may the Zman Cherusenu, the festival of our freedom, bring us real liberation of body and soul together. We have a most interesting challenge this year in that Erev Pesach occurs on Shabbat. This is a great gift, actually, that we receive perhaps too rarely. For this reason alone, most years, this is the first time we've had this situation in about 13 years, Erev Pesach is an extremely busy day, cooking the last-minute foods, nervous about the Seder, making enough space around the table for the guests, remembering last-minute things and running out to the store time and again, and finally, with nightfall, sitting down around the Seder table, quite exhausted from the days and weeks of planning and preparation leading up to the Seder. Now, Most of us are not nocturnal animals, so when it gets dark, we tend to get sleepy. Add 4 cups of wine into the mix, and it's a wonder any of us make it to the end of the Seder. Our mitzvah of the day, starting with the Seder, is joy. And the focus on the meaning, depth, and rich content of the Seder, unfortunately, is sometimes lost a little bit. This year we have a beautiful opportunity to come into the Seder calm, peaceful, tranquil, and very well rested. This is going to happen again in 4 years, and then not for another 20 years after that, Mirvel der Leben. An entire Shabbat will precede the Seder, affording all its opportunity for rest and restoration, if we just take that opportunity. But wait, you ask, when will we do all that preparation? When will we grate the chrein, bake the kugel, roast the eggs and the shank bone? When will we mix the charoses, open the matzah boxes, chill the wine, find the haggadahs in the cabinet, burn the chametz? When are we going to run to the store for pears and for romaine lettuce? Good question. The answer to all the above is before Shabbos. Make sure you make a list and prepare everything you could possibly need for the Seder on Friday or even before. If you use romaine lettuce for maror, clean it and check it for bugs before Shabbos. If you grate horseradish root for maror, peel it and grate it before Shabbos, but keep it in a Tupperware or some other sealed container so it doesn't lose its strength. Hard boil your eggs, roast them before Shabbos. Same thing with your zeroa, your shank bone, your chicken wing, your chicken neck, your lamb shank for the Sfardim, or I understand a slice of beet for the vegetarians, based on a Gemara, I guess. Grate, chop, mix, blend, cook your charoses, whatever you have to do according to your family recipe. Just do it before sundown on Friday. Seems like you could make up the whole Seder plate if you want, cover it with saran wrap, and just leave it in the fridge, ready to go if you like. Also get the Haggadahs ready, and open the tin foil around the necks of the wine bottles, and chill the ones you want to chill. Cut open the seals on the matzah boxes so they're ready to go. Identify which pillows you want to use to recline on. In short, anything you're going to need for the Seder, find it and put it within ready reach for Saturday night. Candle lighting next Friday night is 7:19 p.m. Before that time, we have to make this whole checklist and plan ahead to make sure we can accomplish all the preparations we need to come into Shabbat with the satisfaction that everything's ready for the Seder and for Pesach afterwards. Then we enjoy a blissful 25 hours of rest and calm to allow ourselves to greet Pesach with the simcha that it and we deserve. We'll do that with a number of minor tweaks, adjustments to our normal pre-Pesach schedule, as we'll detail here. We'll also note that since Erev Pesach and Shabbos usually come a few days apart, we usually don't notice the competing values that each one holds. When they're one right after another, it does bring into sharper focus that there are some important things for each, so we'll have to determine case by case which to prioritize. One of those is the notion of busy activity versus rest. Again, Erev Pesach, usually one of the most busy days of the year, right up there with Erev Sukkot and Erev Yom Kippur. There's a lot to do. On Shabbos, there should be nothing else to do other than Shabbat itself. Resting, retreating from engaging with the world, restoring our souls, nourishing body and soul. And right there, you have one tension, or let's call it a balance, to be nice about it. On Shabbat, we're supposed to eat 2, if not 3 meals. And meals include bread. That's one of the mitzvahs of Oneg Shabbat, enjoying the Shabbos. On Erev Pesach, we're not allowed to eat matzah, so that at the Seder, we'll enjoy it with a good appetite. If we can't eat matzah, and if our house has to be kosher lePesach already, how are we going to eat meals with bread? Okay, hold on to that question. Let's go step by step in order. A mitzvah of Pesach, as we read last Shabbos, is to remove all the leaven from our homes. Tashbisu se'or mibateichem. We're forbidden to own or even to have in sight any leavened products. That includes not only crackers and cookies and bread, but beer, liquor, dry pasta, anything else that's leavened. Now, in our days of plenty, when our pantries and our refrigerators are, Baruch Hashem, quite full, it doesn't seem practical to actually consume every last crumb before Pesach. That's a very tall order. So we have the mechanism of mechiras chametz, selling chametz, which you can do through the shul up until Tuesday. After that, you'll have to arrange somehow online for yourself or some other way. In that scenario, any chametz products that you have can be put in a closet or cupboard, and you just close the door with tape and mark it chametz, sold, and you're in full Pesach compliance. We're moving that sale one day back this year, as well as searching the house to make sure all the chametz is removed or put away. So we're moving it back. That's going to happen this year on Thursday night, which is 2 nights before the Seder, as well as burning the leftover chametz, which is going to take place on Friday morning, a day and a half before the Seder, instead of the morning before the Seder. Check those important items off the list, and we'll come into Shabbat more ready for Pesach. Next is getting the food ready. We'll have an entire week from this Motzei Shabbos until next week to kasher our kitchens, bring the Pesach dishes in from the garage or the storage locker or wherever they're kept, and turn the kitchen over, get it ready for Pesach. You know for yourself which day is best to do that, to give yourself the right amount of time. And rest assured that the chicken soup, the gefilte fish, and everything else we eat on Shabbos will be kosher lePesach. Wait a sec, didn't we say that we have to eat our Shabbat meals with bread? We did say that. So here's the very delicate maneuvering to accomplish that. On Friday night, after you make your kiddush, our normal procedure is to go wash our hands, eat hamotzi, and eat some challah together with our Shabbos meal. Since the pots, the pans, the plates, everything that's going to be in use is now Pesach dig, who in their right mind would introduce challah into that situation? Well, it turns out we would, but with foresight and planning. Here's how. Before Pesach, and the bakeries will close early this coming week, so buy ahead of time, get yourself just the right amount of either very small challah rolls or pita or some other bread that you can eat the whole thing and doesn't make a lot of crumbs. Keep those in the freezer until Shabbos, till Friday afternoon, so they'll stay fresh, as you probably won't be able to buy on Friday. Now, after Kiddush, make sure that you have a safe and secure place to eat your bread, your chametz. This could be by moving your chair back from the table a little bit. You can do some social distancing with your chametz. We're all very practiced in that by now. Or you can place a plastic table covering over the whole table where you're going to eat. Or you could even make kiddush and hamotzi in a different place than the table, which is set already for Pesach with Pesach utensils. Each person should have 1 challah roll or 1 pita for each meal, nighttime and daytime. So you make hamotzi, you eat your challah roll holding a tissue underneath, to catch any crumbs. Then you brush any stray crumbs out of your beard into the tissue and dispose of the tissue. How do you do that? If you put it in the green bin, you haven't really disposed of it. You just put it in a different place in the kitchen. If you burn it by lighting it on fire, it's a bit of a problem for Shabbat. So what to do? Flush it. Although some people see that as disrespectful to food, it's really only crumbs. So you could either eat the crumbs or sell them if you feel it's really disrespectful to flush them. Either way, your intention is to completely remove and eradicate chametz from your entire home. Okay, so you did that, then you wash your hands well, you brush off your front to eliminate any stray crumbs, you can even rinse your mouth out, and then you head back to the table to enjoy a delicious Shabbat meal, which happens to be kosher lePesach, in serenity and calm. And we do this all over again Shabbat morning, except you have to finish the chametz by 10:49 in the morning. No more eating chametz after 10:49 Shabbat morning, and you have to dispose of it by 12:06, a few minutes after noon. And you have to recite the disavowal of ownership of chametz, kol chamira, by that time also. So to allow you enough time to do all this, we're going to daven a bit early this next Shabbos morning. Okay, a lot early. We're going to daven at 8 a.m. and hopefully be done by 9:45 in the morning. So you have an hour to get home, make kiddush, eat bread, get rid of the crumbs but before 10:49 in the morning. Okay, shul at 8 a.m., kiddush around 10, finish bread by 10:49 in the morning. If you're following the opinion that it's required to eat shalosh sudas, 3 bread meals with bread on Shabbat, you can do one of 2 things. You can do the eating a roll over a tissue thing 2 times Shabbat morning with Birkat Hamazon and a quick walk or a study break in between to break it into 2 meals. Or you can rely on the opinion that Suda Shlishit, a 3rd Shabbat meal, can also be a piece of fish or a piece of fruit later in the day. Okay, you ate, you rested on Shabbat, you spent some time deep in Torah study, as Shabbat is ideal for. One recommended text for study is the Haggadah Shel Pesach. You won't regret that. Now, night falls on Saturday evening. Shabbat is over. What do you do next? Normally, we daven Ma'ariv and then we join each other on Zoom for a beautiful musical Havdalah together. This year, we're going to have a little bit different procedure next Shabbos. Daven Ma'ariv, which is not the weekday Ma'ariv for the end of Shabbat as other Saturday nights, but rather it's the Yom Tov Ma'ariv that ushers in a festival. That's on page 330, 331 of your Art Scroll Siddur. And for the Amida, you turn to page 660, page 660, 661 for the Amida for the festivals for Pesach. And you, of course, add in the paragraph there in a gray box for the departure of Shabbat for Saturday night. Unfortunately, we will not be having a minyan in Shul in the evenings this Pesach, but that does allow you to move right from Shabbos to Ma'ariv at 8:23 p.m. Saturday night to the Seder without delay, because you have everything prepared from beforehand. It was already Friday. You just need to set the table, put out the matzahs, the wine, the Kiddush cups, and the Seder plate, and begin. Candle lighting for Yom Tov happens next, and we light from a pre-existing flame, either the gas flame on your range, or if you have an electric range, then you should light a 48-hour or a 72-hour candle and keep that burning from before Shabbos. So you can use that to light your Yom Tov candles. Light the candles, make a bracha lahadlik ner shel Yom Tov, and say Shechianu. Now wait, what happened to Havdalah? Did we completely forget about it? No, we just transplanted it into the Seder. Usually at the Seder, the first thing we do is make Kiddush, and that has three brachas: Vayikra Hagadol, Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim, and Shehechianu. So we're going to add two more brachas into Kiddush for the first Seder only for Saturday night. You fill the wine cup, or you have someone fill yours. Take the cup in your right hand, or in your left hand if you're a lefty. First, say the bracha Vayikra Hagadol, as always. Then Kiddush, the paragraph that ends Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim. Then we're going to insert Havdalah at this point. After the Kiddush paragraph, say the bracha we usually say over a candle with multiple wicks on Saturday night, Borei Me'orei Ha'esh. Now, you do not need to buy a special candle with multiple wicks for this. You can, if you like. The stores are more than happy to sell it to you. You can just look at two or more candles burning side by side and say, Borei Me'orei Ha'esh. Blessed is God who creates the lights of fire. Then you say the paragraph of Havdalah. It mentions the distinction between Shabbat and Yom Tov, and it ends with Hamavdil bein Kodesh leKodesh. Blessed is God who sanctifies between the holy and the holy, because Shabbat has a level of holiness and Yom Tov has its own degree of holiness. That's Havdalah, and then continue with Shehechianu, if you didn't say it already, at candle lighting. There's a little mnemonic to remember this sequence, this order of things. Yak Nahaz. You may find it in your machzor there. Yak Nahaz. The first letters are Yayin, Kiddush, Ner, Havdalah, Zman. Yayin for the wine, Kiddush for Kiddush, Ner for the candle, Havdalah, obviously Havdalah, and Zman is Shehechianu. You take those initial letters from each word and it spells out Yak Nahaz. Or as I saw in the Haggadah my sister brought me from Italy, Vino, Sancto, Candela, Havdalah, Tempo. Somehow that sounds better. Then we proceed with the Seder from there, and we're off and running. Although the rest of the Seder follows in its normal format, as we know it from year to year, many layers of meaning and significance await us if we're listening to the very words we're saying. In every generation, the Rambam tells us, we have to see ourselves, or even better, show ourselves, conduct ourselves, like people who are going from captivity to freedom. This year has been a long walk to freedom, one of the longest perhaps in our own memories. Last year at this time, our doors of confinement had just recently slammed shut. Purim was normal, but by Pesach, the shuls were closed. Most stores were closed. We were lining up at Costco for toilet paper, and nobody had any clue how long this would last. We made the Seder with just whoever lived in the house last year. For some of us, that meant alone. It's been a very long year. This year is mixed. We're tasting the freedom that lies ahead with the promise of vaccination, herd immunity, and the ability to gather together in public in a limited fashion. Maybe the optimists, the dreamers among us are thinking that one day we'll be able to gather without masks at some point in the future. We could see each other smile again. Let's not discuss hugs and handshakes. Who knows what their future is? Maybe as we sit down to the Seder next week and we say, Hashta Avdin Lashana Habab Necharin, this year we're slaves. Next year may we be free. Let's follow the Brisker Rav's example and keep the afikomen right next to us all the time. Not to say that you have to keep the piece of matzah right there by you on the table. Hide it if you like. Let the youngsters ransom it if they like. But let's keep the idea of afikomen right there next to us all the time. What's that idea that's worth keeping on the table? That much is concealed from us. That the best part and the most important part is often hidden from our view. That completion and wholeness is possible. That the tastes of suffering and freedom very often are mixed on our palate. That everything we do has an element of brokenness to it and an element of completeness. That what we do, what we say, and what we sing leaves a long-lasting impression on our hearts. And that there is plenty to do, plenty to learn, and to bring to fruition. And while it seems like some of it is beyond our control, there remains quite a lot that is within our grasp. We can reach, we can strive, we can all find. You don't have to be a kid to seek and to find and to be rewarded for it. So may we all continue to search for the afikomen, bringing into our field of vision that which has been hidden. And may we carry a little piece of that with us throughout the year. May we all enjoy a happy and kosher Pesach and begin again this Zman Cherusenu to experience and feel and appreciate profound and far-reaching freedom. And may we see each other soon in person, in good health and in peace. Good Shabbos, Chag Kasher V'Sameach.